Some punishments were meant to hurt, but others were designed to leave a reminder that lasted forever. Branding combined both pain and humiliation by burning a symbol into a person's flesh. For thousands of years, authorities used branding as a way to identify criminals, enslaved people, and anyone considered dangerous. Unlike a fine or a jail sentence, a brand could never be hidden completely. It was a constant mark of shame and proof that a person had been judged and condemned. But where did this practice begin, and why did it become such a powerful form of punishment? What is branding punishment? Branding punishment means pressing a heated metal object, called a branding iron, against the skin until it burns deep enough to leave a scar. In some cases, branding was done with extremely cold irons instead of hot ones, but the result was the same: a permanent mark that could not be erased. The shape of the brand often stood for the crime committed or the person's status. For example, in ancient Rome, runaway slaves were branded with an F for fugitivus, meaning fugitive. Branding could also be applied to the forehead, cheek, hand, or shoulder, depending on how visible the authorities wanted the mark to be. The pain was intense, and the wound could take weeks to heal. Sometimes, infection made the injury even worse. Branding was meant not only to punish the body, but also to destroy a person's reputation. Where did branding originate? Branding has been used in many cultures for thousands of years. The Romans used it as both a criminal sentence and a way to identify slaves. People forced to work in mines or fight as gladiators were sometimes branded on the face, so they could never hide their status. Under Emperor Constantine I, branding the face was banned because it was considered too cruel, so the marks were moved to the hands, arms, or calves. Later, in medieval Europe, branding spread as a form of legal punishment. By the 16th century, it had become common in France, Germany, England, and Italy. Authorities believed that branding made it easier to track repeat offenders, since the scars showed everyone what crimes a person had committed. In some places, branding also had a religious element, punishing heretics or those who refused to follow the official church. How was branding performed? The process of branding was direct and brutal. First, the metal iron, shaped like a letter or symbol, was heated until it glowed red hot. The person being punished was tied down or held still to prevent movement. Then, the iron was pressed firmly against the skin for several seconds. The smell of burning flesh filled the air as the heat destroyed layers of tissue. When the iron was removed, the wound was raw and extremely painful. Over time, a scar formed in the exact shape of the brand. In North America, colonial courts used branding for a variety of crimes. For example, an A on the chest meant adultery, while a T on the hand marked a thief. A B could stand for blasphemy or burglary, and an R on the shoulders signified a rogue or vagabond. Because the letters were clear and easy to read, everyone who saw the scar knew what the person had done. Why was branding considered effective? Branding combined three kinds of punishment in one. First, it caused severe physical pain, leaving a deep burn. Second, it created public humiliation, because the scar was often placed where everyone could see it. Third, it served as a permanent criminal record. Even years later, if someone was caught committing a new crime, authorities could look at the old brand and know they were a repeat offender. For this reason, branding was seen as a deterrent. The threat of carrying a visible mark for life was supposed to discourage others from breaking the law. In practice, however, branding often pushed people further to the margins of society. Those who were branded found it hard to get work, build trust, or move on from their past. Instead of rehabilitation, the mark locked them into a cycle of poverty and stigma. How was branding used against enslaved and oppressed people? Branding was not limited to criminals. Throughout history, it was also used to control enslaved people and others considered property. In the transatlantic slave trade, traders sometimes branded captives to show ownership or to prevent escape. The letters or symbols burned into the skin stood for the slave owner's name or company. Branding was also used in colonial territories to mark rebels or those who resisted forced labor. In Malta, after the conspiracy of the slaves in 1749, some captured rebels were branded with an R for rebelli, Italian for rebels, and sent to the galleys for life. These practices served to dehumanize and terrify, reducing people to property marked like livestock. When did branding start to decline? By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, branding began to disappear from European and American legal systems. Enlightenment ideas about human dignity and rehabilitation gained influence, and many reformers argued that permanent mutilation was inhumane. In France, branding with the fleur-de-lis remained legal until 1832, after which the practice was slowly phased out. In England, branding was abolished in 1829 as part of a wave of reforms to make the justice system less brutal. Even where flogging and caning continued, branding was often among the first punishments to be banned because it left a permanent mark. In North America, branding lingered longer in some regions, especially in connection to slavery, but it too eventually faded as views about punishment changed. Does branding still happen today? While judicial branding has mostly disappeared, the technique has not vanished entirely. In some rare cases, armed groups or criminal organizations have branded captives to mark them as property or as traitors. Branding also survives in different forms as a voluntary body modification. Some people choose to be branded as a rite of passage, a symbol of belonging, or an expression of identity. However, the context is very different. Modern branding is typically consensual and performed in controlled settings. Despite this, human rights groups remain vigilant against any forced branding, which is considered a serious abuse and a violation of international law. What can we learn from branding punishment? The history of branding shows how societies have used pain, fear, and shame to control people. What was once accepted as normal now seems shocking and inhumane. Learning about branding helps us understand why respect for human dignity is so important in modern justice systems. It also reminds us that punishments can leave scars that go far beyond the skin, affecting a person's sense of worth and place in society. Studying this history challenges us to think about how we balance accountability, fairness, and humanity. Branding was designed to make sure no one could ever forget a person's crime, or let them forget it themselves. While it has largely disappeared as an official punishment, it stands as a powerful example of how justice can become cruelty when the goal is to shame rather than to heal. What do you think about branding as a form of punishment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you'd like to learn more about punishment worldwide and throughout the ages, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.